I looked at him and I went, so the guys that made the Hangover movies are going to make a movie about your life, and you're not going to make a dime on it. And he goes, you can tell now he's starting to get worried. You understand what those movies are? I go, they're going to make a movie called Dude, Where's My Hand Grenade? And they're going to make you look like an idiot. Hey, this is Matt Cox, and we're going over part 6 in the videos about me, basically my prison experience. Is that what we're going to call it? Like my prison experience. So at this point, I just went from the medium security prison to the low security prison. I've been locked up. I was locked up 3 years in the medium security prison. I was locked up 1 year in the Marshals holdover, or multiple Marshals holdover. But so far, I've been in prison like 4 years. Listen, it's been 4 years, and I really, like, there's an issue. Like, I'm at the point now where I realize that I'm not going to get my sentence reduced. Like, that's really where I'm at. Like, it's at that point. So I'm at the prison, and did I tell you that? Did I ever mention that? This is when the FBI starts showing up. Like, they showed up at the medium one time. I think they showed up one time, like at the medium. Anyway, so I'm now at the low security prison, and I'm at the low, and I basically go to the education department. I actually know some guys from the medium that have gone to the low now at this point. So I see some of those guys. One of those guys was this guy, Kevin Weeks. I mentioned him in another video. And I remember he was super smart, really sharp guy. He had started shaving his head completely bald because he was going bald and his hair was thinning. And he shaved his head for like 6 months or something. And he looked like, what is Superman's nemesis? Lex Luthor. Kevin Weeks looked like Lex Luthor, and I remember everybody started calling him Lex Luthor. Matter of fact, in my phone, I have a picture of Lex Luthor. So, on him for his phone number. My point is that I'm in the low, and I go to education, and I meet the guy who's teaching the real estate class. And when I meet him, we talk, and he's teaching the class. And I think after a couple months went by, he came to me and he said, look, I don't want to teach the class anymore. Because you can't, like, I can't go in. You can't teach 2 classes. And the second thing is, I didn't want to take, like, there's no way for me to take over his class. Like, he has to give it up. So he comes to me and he says, listen, man, I don't want to teach the class anymore. I've been focusing on my case. And he had a case where he was in real estate too. It's amazing how many real estate guys. There's really very few real estate guys, but it just so happens that they click up right away. So I meet him, and I start taking over the real estate class, and immediately people start coming, and it becomes the same thing all over again. The difference was at the medium, you could teach a class where I could teach some kind of gray stuff, like gray areas. And in the low, you can't teach any gray areas, because in the low, it's really just packed with guys that are desperate to get out of prison. They're all not all nonviolent, but most of them are nonviolent. And they don't want to be there. Like, they don't want to be in prison. And, and they're telling on each other left and right. Not that they aren't at the medium, but the medium, it could go bad for you. Like, you could get stabbed. And at the low, like, it's funny because I hate to say this, because there were stabbings at the low. There were guys cutting each other with razors, and there were attacks, and there was all kinds of stuff happening at the low. But it just wasn't as tense of an environment. And it was what's called there were controlled moves, but it was also an open compound. So during the day, they had controlled moves where you had to, at the beginning of towards the beginning of each hour, you had like 10 minutes to get to where you were going. But after chow, like after you ate lunch or dinner at like 5 or 6 o'clock, it was an open compound until they closed the compound at 9 o'clock. Which means that all the doors were open. You could walk around the compound. They closed the rec yard, but everything else was open. So I'm at the low, and I end up teaching the real estate class again. And I decide at that point, and I already said, like, I'd been on American Greed, I'd been on Dateline. I had a reporter contact me, and he wrote an article on me. And I would get reporters every once in a while. And I was contacted by some of these TV shows. I was contacted by, like, who was I contacted by? There's a TV show called I Almost Got Away with It. I was contacted by another TV show that had been started by the same people who did Dateline. But the thing is, they couldn't interview me. They could interview me on the phone, but they couldn't come and see me. So that never happened. Oh, I was contacted by the show. What was it called? Locked Up Abroad. Still, they couldn't get cameras in, so they just said, they were like, yeah, okay, we thought we could get cameras in to do your to interview you on film, but if we can't, we're not interested in doing a piece on you. But by this point, I realized, like, there's a lot of interest in my case. And so I decide, what I'm going to do is I'd been reading nonstop. Like, I've been reading two books a week, at least 2 books a week. Well, 1 or 2 books a week for 3 years now. So I decided, what I'm going to do? I'm going to start writing my story. So I start writing my story. And I wrote a version, I wrote my story, and it was about 300 pages. It was actually more than that, typed on a Swintech typewriter and, handwritten and everything. But in the end, it was roughly at that point, it was roughly 300 pages. So, which 300 pages is roughly 90,000 words, maybe a little bit more. And I started letting guys read it, and, they were like, oh, this could be better. This, they'll tell you different things. And then I actually wanted to start sending it off. And I got a book sent in called How to Write Query Letters. And and I also got a letter in called the Literary Agent's Guide. So you really can't go directly to, like, someone like Simon & Schuster. If someone like Simon & Schuster or Penguin Books or whoever, if they would come to you, or so there's like the big, there's Doubleday and those kinds of big companies. They would, if they came to you and said, we want you to write your book, or we want you as a writer, or we want to hire someone to write your book, that's really how it works. But if you say, hey, I've written a book and I want to contact these people, you really can't go directly to, like, Simon & Schuster, because they're so big. They don't really deal with authors individually. They deal with literary agents. So I needed to contact a literary agent. So first thing I did was I wrote my book. I then learned how to write what's called a query letter. So I wrote a query letter, and the query letter was, and if I don't say so myself, I hate to say this, but it was great. Like, I wrote a really great query letter, and I sent off, 100 of them, and got maybe a couple people that were interested, and I mailed them the manuscript. And one woman, I worked with her back and forth for maybe a month or two, but I came to the conclusion that I just wasn't going to be able to polish up the actual manuscript good enough for her to be happy. And the other person, like, it just didn't go anywhere. So I contacted my sister, and I said, because my sister had told me that she had a friend that worked in entertainment as an entertainment agent, and he had represented a bunch of comedians, and I forget the name of the comedian that was in the movie Deuce Bigalow. There was a black guy that plays the gigolo. He represented him. He represented a bunch of guys, and he represented a bunch of sports stars, baseball, football players, and he also represented some radio personalities show guys called Ron and Ron. So he represented, this guy's name was Ross Reback. So Ross Reback was like an entertainment agent. And if you know anything about the entertainment industry, what constitutes an entertainment agent is absolutely nothing. Like, there's no license or anything. You can just say, hey, I'm an entertainment agent. So Ross was an entertainment agent, and he'd actually worked on a bunch of stuff, and he'd actually sold several ideas for TV shows. He had also sold or optioned the rights to like I think 1 or 2 books. One of the books was Mob Lawyer. There's a book called Mob Lawyer, which he'd optioned it the rights to pitch the story, the film rights for the book from the family, the lawyer's family, because the lawyer had actually died. He'd written the book when he retired, and then he died. So Ross was trying to get that turned into a movie. So I contact my sister and say, hey, I understand that you and my brother-in-law, which my sister's married to a lawyer, and his name's Jack. So I said, I understand that you and Jack, you said you knew an entertainment lawyer that wanted to talk to me. Ross had actually told my brother-in-law he wanted to meet me and talk to me about my story. But I hadn't really pursued it. So once I wrote the book and I wasn't getting anywhere, I said, hey, look, I need a literary agent, to my sister. And I called her and I said, I need a literary agent. And you said you knew somebody who was in entertainment. And she goes, well, you know what? It's funny. I can call him. I can have Jack call him. I know he wanted to talk to you. So I end up sending Ross Reback my manuscript. He looks at the manuscript. He reads it. He then schedules a time to come visit me. He and my brother-in-law come to Coleman to visit me. So they come to the Low, and I meet them at the Low. And Ross comes in, and I said, hey, Ross, what's going on? Did you read the book? He said, yeah. And he said, I said, okay. He said, well, why do you think? He said, why do you think I'm here? I said, well, I'm assuming you're here because you want to represent me. And he said, I think you have an amazing story. And I read your story. He said, and your story is absolutely amazing. He said, but at the end of the story, like, you're just a psychopath that got 26 years in prison, and I don't care about you. And I went like, wow, that was like, he drove like an hour and a half to get here to tell me that. So I said, wow. I said, that's not what I expected at all. He said, you have a great story, but you didn't tell it great. He goes, you don't talk about your childhood or anything like that, or the things that helped make you the person you are that ended up doing all of these crimes. And I went, I know, but nobody wants to hear me cry and bitch and moan, and nobody wants to hear that stuff because you're wrong about that. I want to hear about that. People want to hear about that. People want to know who you really are. You don't touch on that at all. It's really just he said, it reads almost like a newspaper article. It's like, it's one criminal event after another after another. You're just documenting it. He goes, I don't need to document it. He goes, if I want to read the documentations, he goes, I can just read the articles about you. He said, you have to rewrite that book. And I went, bro, it took me like 6 months to a year to write that book. And he said, you're going to have to rewrite it. And he said, I'm going to send you some books. So he sent me some books. One was like, like True Crime for Dummies. One was How to Write Nonfiction for Dummies. And then I actually somebody had seen me reading these books, and the For Dummies series and the Idiot's Guide to True Crime Writing or something like that. Like, those sound horrible, but they're actually all great books written by really accomplished writers. Hey, if you guys didn't know, I do paintings, and if you're interested in a painting, I'm going to leave my contact information in the description beneath the video. Back to the video. So I end up getting that, and somebody in another unit knew I was writing and came to me and gave me a book. I remember it was probably 90 pages, maybe 100, less than 100, probably less than 100 pages. It was a little tiny book, and I remember it was called, I forget what it was called. I never can remember what it was called, but it was written by a woman who'd written 3 memoirs about her life. 3 memoirs about her life. And I read it in like a day, and it was the best book. Out of all the books I read on how to write, it was the best one. So I then have to rewrite my entire book, and I end up going back and including stuff about my childhood, stuff about my dad, stuff about just things that helped form my personality, form my belief system, things that helped create the person that actually committed the crimes that I committed, and gave reasons for why. Whether these are the actual reasons or not, it's what I believed helped formulate the person that I am. and I hated putting those things in that book because specifically, I had met guys that really had traumatic, by this point in life or in my prison sentence, I'd met guys that truly had horrific upbringings, guys that had been, burned by their parents, beaten by their parents, tied up, abandoned, starved to death, locked in closets. The guys that had truly, truly horrible, childhoods. And so for me to bitch because my dad, didn't really, want me, I wasn't really the son that he wanted, or because I never really felt like I lived up to his expectations, or because I was a disappointment to him, or to bitch about those things made me feel, like just like a fake, like unappreciative for the fact that I grew up middle class, and that so what if you had a bad childhood, you still had a car when you were 16, and you still were able to go to private schools because I had a learning disability, and you still had a mother that loved you, and that sort of thing. So, but I put those things in there. I realized that I shouldn't diminish those things simply because I felt other people had it worse, because certainly other people had it better. So I put those things in there, and I rewrote the book, and it took me like 3 months to rewrite that book. And I sent it to Ross, and he scheduled a time to come out with me again. And he came out and he said, "This book is amazing." He said, "This is a book that can get published. This is a book that could be a movie. This is phenomenal. Your story's amazing." My story hadn't changed. The only thing that changed was me putting in, like, how did I feel when I walked in the bank? How did I feel when I walked out of the bank with a check? How did I, and about things about my childhood and about my relationship with my parents, my siblings, my girlfriends. Like, I didn't really have anything before about my girlfriends, the events that had occurred. So he said, it needed to be more personal stuff. So I had included that. And so he loved the book, and he wanted to represent me on the book. And what I decided was, I absolutely wanted to go with Ross, and I thought Ross was a great guy. And so Ross said he was going to, he wanted to represent me on that, on my memoir, which my book's called, Shark in the Housing Pool. So while that process was going on, I was wrapping up final edits for Ross, and he had sent me final edits. And he had decided he was going to start contacting literary agents, or I'm sorry, he was going to start contacting publishers. I kind of decided I was going to start writing other inmate stories because I really liked writing. Like, it gave me a real feeling of accomplishment. Like, I enjoyed it. And so at the same time as I was wrapping that up, there was a newspaper, there was an article in Rolling Stone magazine about, it was called Arms and Dudes. It was called Arms and Dudes. And so I was like, okay, Arms and Dudes. And I read it. And it was about these two Jewish kids that were stoners in Miami that had kind of stumbled their way into getting a contract to supply ammunition to the Afghan security forces they always say a $300 million contract, but it was actually $298 million. The point is, so roughly a $300 million contract to supply munitions for the Afghan security forces, but the U.S. government was the one that was paying them and collecting. So even though the money was the ammunition was going to end up in the Afghanis security forces' hands, it was actually the U.S. government that had put out the contract. They bid on it. They got the contract, and they were getting paid by the government. So the main kid, there were two guys. One was David Packowls, and guy's name was Efraim Diveroli. Well, Efraim Diveroli had ended up, Efraim Diveroli had ended up in Coleman Low. He'd got like 6 years, 3 years, no, 4 years, 3, 4. I don't know. What I know is I think he got 4 years. Yeah, I think he got 4 years. Maybe, whatever. That's irrelevant. If you're interested, look it up. So he got some time. He got like roughly, 4 or 5 years. So he came to the Low. And while I was standing in line one time with this guy, and I read the article maybe a week ago by the same guy that gave me the article. And all of a sudden, the guy I'm standing with in line waiting for lunch or dinner, he hits me and he goes, "Hey, bro." He says, "See that guy over there?" And I go, "Yeah." He goes, "The guy with the curly hair?" And I went, "Yeah." He goes, "That's Efraim Diveroli." And I went, "Who?" He goes, "Remember the article I gave you in Rolling Stone magazine?" I went, "Yeah." He goes, "That's the guy." I go, "The gun runner?" And he goes, "That's the gun runner." And I was like, holy shit. He got so fat. Like, he was real fat. And I was like, oh my God. I said, "That's him?" And he goes, "Yeah, bro." He said he got here a couple days ago. And I was like, oh, wow. I said, what a great story. And so we're walking, and the guy's name was Chris. Chris goes, "Bro, you need to talk to him." And I went, "About what?" And he goes, "About writing his story." And I went, "Yeah, you're right." And I kind of decided I liked that, and I thought about doing it. And I went, "Yeah, I should talk to him. Maybe I should." So I went a couple days later. I found Diveroli on the rec yard, and I went up to him. I said, "Hey, what's your name's? You're Diveroli, right?" And he goes, "Yeah." And I said, "Listen, man." I said, "My name's Cox, and I read that article in Rolling Stone. It was a great article." And he goes, "Yeah." He goes, "That cocksucker, the guy that wrote it." He goes, "Said I was a greedy bastard." He goes, "If you think that's great." And I went, "Well, I didn't see it that way. I thought it was great. It was just that you guys were able to get the contract and just the way the whole thing unraveled. I thought it was an amazing story." And he goes, "Yeah, well, yeah, it's pretty good, but they really did a hatchet job on me." Like, this guy's a fucking complainer. So I said, "Well," he goes, "Well, what's up, bro?" I said, "Well, I was wondering if you had considered writing a book." And he goes, "Nah." He's, "Man, I'm I got ADHD. He said, "I'm bipolar." He said, "I'm up and down. I got mood swings." He says, "There's just no way I could focus long enough to write a story." I said, "Well, I'm finishing up my book right now. If you want, I could help you write an outline, and you could send that to a ghostwriter on the street." And he went, "Well, yeah, I guess." He goes, I said, "I mean, if you're thinking you can't do it, maybe you could just hire someone." He said, "It sounds to me like you probably still have money, and ghostwriters don't cost but between $15,000 and maybe $45,000. You could probably get a ghostwriter to do it for 20 or 30. At this point," I said, "you have so much publicity, and when you get out, you're going to have a ton of publicity." I said, "And if you wrote a book, there would probably be tons of publicity on the book." I said, "It really shouldn't be that hard." I said, "I'm in the process right now of trying to get my stuff done. And I just wrote my book, and I'd be finishing it up. I was doing some final edits." And I said, "If you're willing, I'd be willing to help you." And he kind of looked at me weary, and he was like, "Yeah, I don't know. I'll think about it, bro. I'll think about it." Like, he was like, he didn't trust me or something. He was just, and he's a very untrustful person in general. So he goes, "I'll think about it. I'll think about it." I said, "Okay, well, let me know." So I leave. Anyway, like a couple of days later, I see him on the compound. We're walking by, and I said, "Hey, what's up?" He goes, "I'm still thinking about it, bro." And he keeps walking. Another week goes by. Another week goes by. And by this point, it's been months. Months go by. And then one day I see him, and I said, "Hey," "Hey, what's up?" He goes, "Hey, bro, wait a minute. I've been looking for you." He goes, "Stop." And I go, "What's up?" He said, "Did you hear that they sold the article in Rolling Stone? They optioned the rights to it. They're going to make a movie." And I looked at him and I went, "But the article wasn't written from Efraim Diveroli's perspective. It was written from David Packow's perspective. And David Packow's had made Diveroli sound, I don't think he made him sound that bad, to be honest. But the article was written in such a way that they basically both sounded like stoners who were kind of buffoons." And I went, and he's when we talked in the rec yard, he had told me that he didn't like that. He didn't like that it made him sound like a fucking stoner, like he was an idiot of some kind. Like he was like, "Oh, dude," like they bumbled their way into the contract. Because after talking with Diveroli, he wasn't that guy. He was a very driven person. And granted, he was all over the place, but he was extremely aggressive. So I stopped him and I went, really? I said, well, who bought it? And he goes, yeah, he said, oh God, I forget. It was like, I forget who bought it, but it basically, I forget the name of it. It was essentially, though, it was the guys, it was Todd Phillips, which is the guy who made the Hangover movies. So Todd Phillips and Bradley Cooper had purchased the film rights and the life rights the film rights and the life rights for the story, and from David Packouz. And so I looked at him and I went, so the guys that made the Hangover movies are going to make a movie about your life. And he goes, yeah, bro. Yeah. Pretty cool, right? And I went, and you're not going to make a dime on it. And I said, do you understand? Have you seen the Hangover movies? And he goes, you can tell now he's starting to get worried. He's like, yeah, I've seen them. I go, do you understand what they make? You understand what those movies are? I go, they're going to make a movie called Dude, Where's My Hand Grenade? And they're going to make you look like an idiot. You're going to look like David Spicoli from Fast Times at Ridgemont High, which I'm sure people that are watching this are probably in their 20s and 30s and don't know what Fast Times at Ridgemont High is. Do you? Fast Times at Ridgemont High is it's a coming of age story that takes place with several kids that are graduating like high school. And one guy is a complete stoner. Like he gets a pizza delivered to class while he's in class. He's stoned all the time. He's like, oh, dude, bro, like, what's up, man? Like, oh, that's crazy, yo. I mean, just a complete stoner, like the quintessential stoner, straight out of Central Casting is David Spicoli. So, and I looked at him and I go, you're going to be David Spicoli from Fast Times at Ridgemont High. They're going to make you look like an idiot. And I said, you're going to get out of prison in a couple of years and you're probably going to want to go back into business, right? And he went, yeah. And I said, you're going to introduce yourself to people as Efraim Diveroli and they're going to snicker. That would be like me introducing myself as David Spicoli. If I did that to another 50-year-old, my age, my generation, they would laugh. They'd go, are you serious, bro? Like they would immediately laugh. And I said, but Diveroli knew who David Spicoli was. He was not that much, he's younger than me, but not that much younger. And he went, the look on his face was like, holy shit. He hadn't even considered that if he didn't like the article, what was he going to like when Todd Phillips got done with him? What was he going to look like when Todd Phillips got done making him look like a fool? And so I looked at him and I said, bro, you're going to look like an idiot. And he goes, yo, man, he said, he goes, man, I went and you're going to look like an idiot because you can't meet me once or twice a week so that we can write an outline of your story so you can write a short book so you can get a movie made. I said, that movie should be being made from your perspective. Because I said, it's really your story. But they're not going to tell your version of the story. They're going to tell David Packouz's version. And you have to understand there's nothing he could do about it because it was public record. He'd been convicted of a crime and those records are public. He'd been in the newspaper. His name had been in the newspaper. So they can now use his name and his likeness as long as they stay close to the truth. There's nothing he can do. Now, he can sue, but he has to have grounds to sue. And simply saying, hey, you used my name and you weren't accurate in your depiction of me isn't really enough. Like it is, but it isn't. Like you could sue, but you probably wouldn't get very far. Hey, I wanted to let you guys know that I have a Patreon account. If you're interested in joining the Patreon account, it's got 3 tiers. The top tier, you actually get a different con man painting every single month. If you're already joined and you're already supporting me, I really appreciate that. If you haven't joined yet and you're interested in joining, I'm going to leave the contact information for Patreon in the description. Thank you very much for watching the video. Back to the video. So what he does is he looks at me and he says, man, how quickly can we meet? How quickly can we meet? And I went, I mean, we can meet tonight. He goes, bro, let's meet tonight and we'll work out a deal and you start writing. How quickly can you write? I said, I don't know. How much of your stuff do you have? You mean, I got everything. I got a great memory. I can tell you all the dates, times, everything you need. Because, you know, what I'd been doing, like for my own case, I figured out how to order something called the Freedom of Information Act. And that basically allows you to go and so there's a federal Freedom of Information Act, which allows you to go to any federal agency and order any document that they have on you. So I was able to do that. And you can also go to all of the states have a Freedom of Public Records Act, which allows you, any person, to order documents on any individual that's been, let's say, arrested or investigated. And they have to provide those documents for you. So I'd been ordering documents on myself. And I told him, I said, well, I might have to order the documents on you and that might take some time. And he goes, no, bro, I have a great memory. I know when all the dates are. I know all of the amounts. I know my case inside and out. And he goes, plus I have all the files in my case in my legal locker and in boxes underneath my bed. So he had everything. So I said, bro, if that's the case, I could probably write your whole outline in a month or so. He goes, all right, let's meet tonight. So we start meeting. We meet every other night for probably 2 or 3 weeks. In the meantime, and I write an extensive outline on him and his entire story. And it's a great story. It's a story that's so much better than that movie is or probably could have ever been. It was just a great story. It really should be an entire series. It's so phenomenal. And what's really amazing is that this guy, David Packows, who the movie ultimately kind of gets written from his perspective, he comes in at the very end. Like the movie and the article make it sound like they started the company together and they were together the whole time. But the truth is, Diveroli had been fulfilling contracts for years prior to Packows coming in. So Packows doesn't really know the whole story. He knows his story, but he doesn't know Diveroli's story. Diveroli's story is phenomenal. And I realized this right away as I'm writing the story. He's also a much more vicious character than was portrayed by Jonah Hill. Jonah Hill plays him in the movie. And he's a much more vicious person and much more aggressive person than the article or the movie portray him as. I mean, he's truly a cutthroat person. I mean, just ruthless. So while I'm writing that story or writing his outline, as I get to the end of the outline, Diveroli says, Matt, I got a question for you. I said, what? He said, did you finish your book? And I said, yeah, I basically just finished it. Just got it sent in. I'm still kind of reading over it, maybe doing some touch up, typos, whatever. And I was waiting for Ross Reback to come see me again, which was a few weeks away. And I said, he sat there and he goes, okay. He said, can I read it? And I went, yeah, you can read it. And he goes, okay, yeah, give it to me, bro. I'll read it. I said, okay. So I go and I give him the book and I give him my manuscript. Manuscript was like, God, the manuscript was big too. Like the book ultimately ended up being like 330 pages, I think. But the manuscript was like 400 and some odd pages, but it's just because the formatting was fucked up. The lettering was too big and there were spaces so that I could write notes. And so I give it to him, and maybe a week, less than a week goes by maybe. And I remember I kept asking him like, hey, did you start the book? No, not yet, bro. Next day, hey man, did you start the book? No, not yet. And I'd walk by him in the compound, or I'd see him in the chow hall or something. I go, man, did you start the book? And he goes, nah, I'm going to do it tonight. I'm going to do it tonight. And so it's like 3 or 4 days went by. He hadn't started it. And then one day I stopped asking him, like 3 days later, he shows up and walks up with the book, boom, puts it down. And he said, we're supposed to meet to go over some of the stuff on his outline. He goes, how much? And I went, what? He goes, how much? What would you charge me to write my book? He said, what you wrote is amazing. He goes, that's the best thing I've ever read in my entire life. And I go, are you serious? He goes, I want you to write my book. I'm telling you, man, like that's what I want. That is what I want. He's like you You say it exactly how it is. You describe yourself exactly how you are. He goes, and on top of that, he said, you said some bad stuff about yourself. Like you admitted that you're a flawed individual. However, in overall, he said, I rooted for you. I wanted you to succeed. He said, I was devastated when you got caught, even though I knew it was coming. He said, you were a flawed person, but overall, an amazing individual. He goes, and that's what I want people to know about me. And I was just like, wow. I said, I don't know. Like I'd probably like want a percentage of the book. Like I just want a percentage of whatever sales or whatever you get. Film rights, like the whole thing. And he's like, okay. He said, we can do that. And he said, okay. He said, yeah, man. He said, and he said, I don't really know how it works. Like how exactly was it going to work? And I said, okay, well, I said, you could get a literary agent, but I said, you could go with my literary agent. I said, I have a literary agent that is coming to see me in a couple of weeks. And so we work out a deal, and I told him he had to pay me because I had to type the whole thing up in what's called Core Links, which is our it's like an email system, sort of like an email system. Like I said, I have to type everything up, and I was already typing his outline. So I said, you have to like basically send me money. And so I could type everything up. And he said, yeah, I'm going to put you in contact with my sister, and I'm going to give you all the documents. And he said, but we got to do this right away because he's like, I'm going to be moving in a few months. You have to write this whole thing in a few months. I was like, oh, wow, I don't know if I can do it in a few months. So he and I start working everything out. And he ends up saying, look, I got to get an entertainment attorney to write up a contract. Can we start now? I can put money on your books for you to start typing. And I was like, here's the great thing was I had just kind of finished up, or was roughly finishing up within a week or so, his outline. And I'd written this exhaustive, like 80-page outline. Like I only have to really expand this outline that I'd written over the last month or two. So it wasn't going to be that hard. Like I don't really even need him anymore. I just need the documents. I'd heard the stories. 80 pages, if you turn 80 pages into, let's say, 300 pages, it's not that hard to expand. Anyway, I had it and I was thrilled, and I was like, oh my God, this is great, because I knew this was going to be a good book. And not just that, there was a chance that this book could be turned into a movie or a series, because although they had sold the film rights to the article, which had been written in Rolling Stone magazine by a guy named Guy Lawson, although they had sold the film rights, they hadn't actually done anything yet. Like there was no script or anything yet. So nothing had been done. Like it was still a chance that we could kind of get ahead of the film that was supposedly in motion. Like they haven't even got a script. So if you move a little faster, maybe you get your stuff made. I didn't really know how it worked, but I knew that at the very least he could probably get a book deal. The reason I say that also is that there was a book. So Guy Lawson, who'd written the Rolling Stone article, was expanding his article into a full-length book. That wasn't even scheduled to come out for like a year. So I had time. So I end up putting Diveroli in touch with my literary agent, and we schedule a time for all of us to meet in the visitation. Now, keep in mind that he couldn't just meet with Reback without me, okay? Because you have to say when you fill out paperwork, you have to say you have an existing relationship with the person. And Reback had lied on Reback had come in the first time with my brother-in-law, and that got him approved to come see me. So he's already approved. But he can't get approved to come see Diveroli. So we schedule it so that Diveroli is going to have his mother and sister and his brother come to see him the same day that Reback's going to come see me. So we'll all be in the visitation area at the same time. And so we can all sit together and have a conversation so that they can meet in person. And basically so that Reback can kind of pitch himself on who he is and what he thinks he can do for Diveroli. But we're already at 40 minutes, so I'm going to wrap this up and I'll explain what happens in that meeting and how that whole thing kind of evolves with me writing the story for Diveroli. The name of his book, by the way, is called the book that I wrote for him. It's a memoir, so I wrote it in first person as him, as if he wrote it, which he didn't. And it's called Once a Gun Runner. And it's amazing. It's an amazing story. I believe he still has it up on, I think there's an ebook, an e-version. Anyway, I'll tell you how the whole thing plays out. So I ended up writing this whole book for him. And, but yeah, so I'll talk to you about our first meeting and about how the Diveroli things and how the Diveroli thing works out and our first meeting with Ross in the next video. So I appreciate you guys watching. Please subscribe to the channel. Please hit the notification bell so you get notified of videos like this. And, leave me a comment if you like these videos or, whatever. And I appreciate it. And thank you.